Welcome to Dare, the show for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders who dare to shape the future. Your hosts today are Ned Hayes and Cecilia Mariani. Dare is brought to you by Darwaf, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. The Dare podcast is excited to welcome Collin Graves today to the show. He's the leader and CEO of North Labs, which is a fractional cloud data analytics firm. He can tell us more about what that means. And then he's also done a lot of work with a number of companies in the past, including companies such as Tenacity Cloud, Zipnosis, Cloud CTO, Perk Health, and most importantly, he's also been a member of NATO Special Operations when he was part of the U.S. Air Force. So welcome to the show, Collin.
Yeah, happy to be here, Ned. Thanks for having me.
Well, first, let's hit it on the chin. What does North Labs do?
Sure. Yeah, I've been involved in cloud computing and specifically cloud data analytics for the last 17 years. I started my first group, learned all about the cloud while I was in the military, and became one of the first 10 fully certified folks in the world for AWS. But at the end of the day, what North Labs does is we are, like you said, a fractional data and analytics consultancy for emerging and mid-market companies primarily. And our most common customer base is in manufacturing and industrial. But sort of how we're different is we bring fractional data and AI leadership to the table for these organizations, sort of almost acting like a fractional chief data officer in a lot of circumstances. But we also bring a fully integrated team along with us to help with the design and implementation and management of any solutions that get put in place. So from leadership all the way down to environment maintenance and everywhere in between as far as cloud data and analytics are concerned.
So when you say small and mid-sized, how big are we talking about?
Yeah, we say emerging, I know is such a catchphrase, right? But really where we specialize is companies under $1 billion in revenue. Our average customer is going to be between 50 million and 500 million most of the time. And 80% of them will be in, we say manufacturing and industrial. We keep industrial very broad because we include things like medical device and logistics and energy utility, but primarily any organization that is asset intensive in its operations are really good fits for us. And there are exceptions. We work with groups who are not in that realm at all, but that's definitely where I think we have the best reputation.
Right. So you're working with companies who are just starting to hit those upper boundaries of needing a solution that scales without hiccups and that needs to be robust, needs to service a customer base that's broad and diverse. And so you're able to come in as an expert and help them understand what that future looks like for them, right?
Exactly. It's how do you implement, you think about all the functions in an organization from sales to marketing to production and operations and supply chain and everything in between. In today's day and age, we're really able to treat that data and analytics pursuit as I like to say, the connective tissue between those functions, where it used to be way back in the day, very data integration intensive, trying to get one system to talk directly to another. Now we're able to use cloud technologies to sort of act as that intermediary. So you're able to unify across all of the data, across all your functions in the business, and ultimately make better decisions, which is really what organizations are trying to do.
Right. And so how did you come to work with this class of companies? I mean, you have a wealth of experience. Why focus here?
I'm not quite sure how it happened, Ned. To be honest with you, this was never a conscious decision.
Yeah.
I had run a similar company from 2010 through 2014. So sort of on the tail edge of my military tenure. And shortly after I got out, I ran a very early AWS partner. And we worked mostly in the construction services segment. But when I started North Labs, I really didn't care about what industry we were going to go into. I knew I just wanted to focus on the cloud and cloud data and analytics as much as possible. But my first company or my first customer was a very large defense contractor who I still to this day don't understand how they found me, don't understand why they thought to reach out to me, because at the time there was like 3 people at North Labs and we were competing with the very large global consultancies. And for whatever reason, they selected us to fulfill their project, which was in the business of autonomous submarine technology. And it just sort of took off from there as very organic, but obviously word of mouth gets out and referrals are made. And pretty soon we had a couple other defense contractors come through, and then a very large, tractor manufacturer, and it sort of snowballed from there. But it was never intentional, but I'm thankful for the ability to say we're specialized in any sort of way.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've gotten some really positive referrals. So tell us what an engagement looks like. Like, I'm not asking you to share any proprietary customer data, but if you could walk us through a kind of step by step, what does it look like when you first come in to meet with the client, to work with their team? And then what are the stages of progressive improvement in the work that the client does under your guidance?
Sure. So if I take an average snapshot of a customer, they're about a 75 or $100 million a year organization. They know they have a lot of data and that data could be useful, but they're just trying to figure out, typically it's their maybe CTO, maybe their vice president of supply chain, whatever the case may be, trying to figure out how to leverage this data to drive efficiencies in the business, right? And so they're typically at a rather immature starting point. There are exceptions there for sure, but we'd frankly like it when customers are coming to us sort of at the ground level. Typically, they'll engage with us for a few months, sort of in a sort of pilot project where we're installing that sort of strategic leadership alignment within their organization. We're trying to understand why we care about doing this, what the perceived ROI is in doing this, what a successful outcome looks like for the business doing this, as far as the executive team views it. Then we're going to start just like if you think about building a house, right? What's the first thing you have to do after the ground is graded? You pour concrete, right? And that's typically your sort of foundational data infrastructure. People call it a data lake house, a data warehouse, data fabric, whatever the heck you want to call it. That's the most important part because it's the platform through which any other conceivable use case is experienced over time. So we're going to focus on that raw ingestion of data, that initial modeling of data, typically around a very specific use case. It does not work very well when organizations come to us and say, yeah, we just want to ingest all of our data and we'll figure out what to do with it when it's there. We actually won't accept a project like that.
Right. So actually having a specific use case, understanding what the customer use case is, I mean, that can make it successful, right?
That's the only way to have an ROI thesis attached to it, right? I'm in the business of creating vending machines of ROI for customers. And I know that if Ned's going to put $1 into the machine and $2 is going to come out, Ned's going to keep putting $1 into the machine. Right. And if we can take that from $2 to $4, he's going to put even more dollar bills into the machine. So it's all initially tied around a quantifiable business facing use case, not just, hey, there's too many people doing this or it seems kind of slow. That's okay. But if we can get to the point why I love manufacturing industrial, because you're taking raw materials and putting it through your value chain and you're arriving at outputs that you sell to customers, it's very easy to look at that value chain and go, here's where the biggest gap is. It's too often that we're spraying a widget blue and it should be green, and we need to send it to the scrap heap, or the tolerances aren't quite such and it needs to go back for rework. That's a very great starting point. And typically where that first couple months of engagement, we're sort of looking into the business and trying to understand where that cornerstone use case should be.
Right, right. And so could you tell us when have things gone well and when have things gone sideways?
Oh, I sure can. I think the biggest, when have things gone well? I will say, Ned, that I haven't always been in the business of obsessing about business value and business cases. When I first started the company, it was very much like, hey, you have budget you want to part with, cool, we can build stuff and we can build it really well. And sometimes customers have a different perception of what they're going to receive versus what you think you're building.
This is so true. When there's a mismatch there, nobody's going to be happy.
Correct. And you can try and guardrail it out in your scopes of work or statements of work all day long. It's not a good way to do it because we hear what we want to hear, customers hear what they want to hear, and there's a divide that's created. So for us, I actually won't approve a project from any member of my team who comes to me all excited, hey, I think I've got one, right? Unless you have a very well-defined business case
Mm.
that's been agreed to by an executive stakeholder, the project doesn't happen. So if you have a
Mm.
lower level individual contributor who says, yeah, hey, I want to spend some discretionary budget and just knock these couple of things out, we're not going to be a good fit for that, right? We need to
Right.
align at the economic buyer or steering committee level in order to make the impact that we want to make, because we're not the cheapest group on the market. Our deals are typically multi-year in length. You're going to part with several $100,000 along the way, but the idea is that the business case is clear and obvious enough to where you'll gladly part with that budget if a successful implementation is realized. So that's very difficult to do when you're down a little further down the org chart and just looking where to sort of spend discretionary funds.
Right, right. It needs to be really focused.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I'm curious, what has surprised you about working in this industry, or any projects that have really been surprising to you over the last 5 to 10 years?
Oh, this industry is full of surprises. I mean, yeah, being in this for 17
No, it
years.
is. I know it
I,
is.
I mean, just to give people context, when I got started in the cloud and with AWS, there were two services
Ah,
in the entire AWS portfolio. And now we're at what? More than 220. So it's been, and that's just for AWS. And I've
yeah.
got, now we
Plus
work with.
Azure or Google Cloud, or, pick your poison, right?
Exactly. And then you see even just all of the growth of individual ISVs like Snowflake and Databricks. And I mean, it's just crazy how times, how this landscape has evolved. I think what surprises me most is I didn't expect to see this big of a pop in the Gen AI conversation that we have. And I know that there's always going to be some hype cycle that we're going through. And I certainly think we're, sort of on the peak of inflated expectations right now. And we've got the trough of delusionment coming for us. And then we'll sort of climb our way back into more realistic expectations of what this technology can do. But I mean, if I look at my LinkedIn, Ned, half the people who connect with me on LinkedIn say they're Gen AI experts.
And how many people are actually Gen AI experts? Yeah,
What
come on.
constitutes an expert? It used to mean something, 10,000 hours of mastery, and you could teach a class on it. And I think of guitar mastery, right? The Steve Vais and Joe Satriani's of the world, and Ingmar Malmsteen. And these guys have played guitar for decades and tens of thousands of hours. They are
Yeah.
masters. Just because you read a couple of ebooks and watched some YouTube videos and did a sandbox project on your Mac OS system doesn't make you an expert. And it makes me so ill to my stomach that there are people out there going after budgets claiming to be an expert when it would be very difficult to consider oneself a Gen AI expert at this juncture.
Right. Well, I do know some actual experts in the field
Yes.
there back when natural language processing was just starting out, who wrote some of the seminal papers on this stuff, who worked on the early idea of being able to tune and train models that then became larger and larger and eventually became large language models. Like, I know some of those experts.
Those are the experts.
Yeah, those people are the experts. And half these people out there, they just figured out what GPT and LLM means like a year ago.
Right.
So
Exactly.
right, right. It is kind of hilarious to see those people. But I will turn the question around and ask you, how is this not just the hype, but how does the reality of people wanting to use AI affect the kind of work that you're doing at North Labs? And how does it affect your customer base?
I tell you, I have not seen a pull toward cloud data that I've seen with Gen AI since the advent of the cloud. This is the
Wow.
single biggest moment or single biggest emergence of something that is pulling stakeholders toward more sophisticated cloud data maturity, unequivocally, because all of their friends are talking about it and their colleagues on their CIO panels they belong to and everything like that. Everyone's talking about it. So we have seen customers come back online from a sales conversation perspective going, okay, now's the right time for us to make this shift from a large on-premise footprint to the cloud because we want to get a piece of that pie from a Gen AI perspective. So I mean, I give it kudos. The virality effect that has occurred is remarkable. My only hesitation now is, okay, in order to truly take advantage of Gen AI, we're back at that square one conversation that you and I touched on a few minutes ago. We've got to pour the foundation of the house. Otherwise, none of our AI efforts are ever going to amount to much.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And also, it's going to be hit and miss. This is a very emerging market. LLMs change all the time. Can you imagine the groups who did a waterfall onboarding approach to GPT 2 or 3
Yeah.
9 months ago? And now
They,
4 odd is out. And
time they got all the way through it, the whole thing had changed.
now you've got an LLM out there that you custom tuned this LLM over the course of 9 months or a year. And now GPT 4 odd can do it out of the box.
Right.
That's a precarious situation to be in if you get called in to talk to your executives or to your board. So the best advice that anyone can take on this is just move slowly, right? Start small, prove things out, and be willing to sort of circle back on things over time, because we're nowhere near a steady state for this
Right.
ecosystem
It's
yet.
also kind of silly how people are describing things as AI when really they mean large language models. And I mean, there's a number of other things that are in the nomenclature of the tech industry can be called AI, which is like graph neural networks, convolutional neural networks, reinforcement learning, generative adversarial networks, transformers. Those are all different types of AI that are not necessarily LLMs. But
Right.
people who are not educated in the market, they conflate all of this, and that's not helpful for the kinds of customers that you have, who are industrial customers or people who are actually shipping and manufacturing things that they just need to use the stuff to make the things.
Right.
And confusing the terms is not helpful.
Right. Yeah. Large language models is right.
Just a portion of AI industry.
Yeah, and is it fair to say that it's just an augmented form of machine learning? When you're training an LLM for context, you're still doing the good dog, bad dog sort of conversation, right? Good dog, here's a bone. Bad dog, here's a slap on the snout. And pretty soon you have a tuned model, but we don't have neural networks forming from this. And that's what I consider to be true AI. But, it's certainly a fun buzzword, and we're going to keep conflating it. There's no doubt.
Right, it's true. There's no out. So we've talked about North Labs, what you're doing today, what you've done in the past. We didn't really get into the past in great detail, but I know that your formative work, your formative years were really formed in the armed forces. So can you tell us a little bit about what that kind of experience gave you? What kind of grounding and foundation it laid for you?
Sure. Yeah, I was not set to immediately join the military after high school. I was set to go through ROTC at a 4-year university for pre-med, because when you don't know what you want to do in high school, you just say you're going to be a doctor. And my mom had spent a long career at Mayo Clinic and other health networks in the Midwest. But that year that I was set to go, the campus I was going to attend, the University of Iowa, flooded so badly that I was going to spend my whole first year in a Holiday Inn Express, which
Wow.
sounds like a terrible Seth Rogen movie. And I was like, I already don't really care about going to school all that much. I'm going to try and walk onto the baseball team. Maybe I'll enlist instead. And so I joined the Air Force, started in South Dakota on the B-1 bomber, which is the most active aircraft since 9/11. It is the plane with the largest payload capacity in the military's fleet. Most people think it's the B-52. It so is not. It's the B-1. I deployed immediately, being in support of the B-1s, because Ellsworth in South Dakota has 2 of the 3 B-1 squadrons in the Air Force, the third being in Dyess, Texas.
Yeah.
And so that was my first long tour. I moved to Ramstein, Germany, where NATO is headquartered. I didn't start at NATO there. I moved there to support the C-130Js as a flying crew chief, and was asked to get involved with supporting NATO special operations for the sort of back half of my career. So I always tell people I was the least impressive person on an aircraft every day of my life for many years, which is quite an ego check for a 20-something-year-old kid. But I was flying with Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Air Force Pararescue, MARSOC, TACP, Delta, just truly the best the military has to offer, and flying with their NATO counterparts. So
Wow.
the Italian military, the Spanish military, it was really, really cool. And I spent most of my time in the former Soviet bloc and all of Africa. I spent a lot of time in Africa. doing everything from humanitarian runs to really supporting a lot with the sort of child soldier, child slavery, just craziness that they have over there, hunting bad guys who stole children from their families and turned them into soldiers. And it was the best thing I ever did. And I learned about the cloud while I was in. I had no idea how to do anything related to software engineering. So I was totally self-taught when I started my first company. I learned how to code. I used to hang a hammock up in the back of a tail cone of the C-130 when we were flying around, and I would push my Git commits over ultra high secure NATO or Air Force routers.
Not everybody has that experience, do they?
Yeah, so there'd be 82 Navy SEALs hanging out, reading books, listening to country music or whatever, and I'd be in the back, pretending to be a software engineer. But that led me to start my first group called Cloud CTO. Essentially, what we did was built an early rendition of Dropbox for construction services firms. So this was back before Dropbox was around, and construction firms needed to share large format files in the field over 2G cellular. So we created them an easy file sharing application where they could send to each other and receive those plans. And then a brilliant man named Drew Houston came along and started Dropbox, and my services were no longer needed, but I had fortunately sold it to a private equity group. Small, unimpressive acquisition. They mostly wanted my customer list, but
yeah. But what's fascinating is if you've been in the tech world long enough, you see the same paradigms come up and the same sort of analogies. And so you can track the patterns, basically. You can be a spotter. Yeah. Well, speaking of patterns, let's talk about, as our last question, the future. What do you dare to dream?
In terms of the cloud or in terms of Collin Graves?
Let's go for both. The cloud, and then let's talk about what does Collin Graves dare to dream?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. In terms of the cloud, I think we're going to eventually see the hype around Gen AI temper a bit. I don't think it will go away, but then we will have a resurgence talking about patterns, just like we saw with the cloud back in the sort of 2010 through 2015 era, where everyone rushed to the cloud as fast as possible, sort of went, this doesn't work well, let's back off, and then, let's smartly do this instead. Starting in about 2015, 2016, we're going to see the same thing with Gen AI. So we're going to see massive pandemonium to Gen AI, all the things. You see it on your LinkedIn feed all the time, the ridiculous suggestions that LinkedIn gives you for comments on people's posts makes me sick to my stomach. It's a land grab. It's awful. That will go away. We will have a short cooling off period, and then we will come to actually realize how to leverage Gen AI and LLM technologies in our business to move the needle, as opposed to saying just slap Gen AI on it and all of a sudden its market value will, 10x. So we'll see that. From a data architecture perspective, we will continue to see the emergence of the data mesh and data fabric architectures that folks have been talking about. Groups like Starburst and Trino out there who are really carrying the baton from that perspective. It's still quite nascent. It's really reserved for early adopters right now. We will start to see that come more mainstream, which is ironic because venture capital has poured so much money into ETL tools over the last 6 months. So the irony is that they will become more obsolete as data fabric and data meshes sort of take a foothold. As far as Collin Graves, just in another life, I like to race cars. I race sort of semi-professionally. So I'm going to continue to do that. My dream is to someday drive in the sort of World Endurance Championship. And I've wanted to do that since I was a little kid. So we'll keep on doing that. But I've still got a lot of gas in the tank with North Labs. We're growing. We've got an excellent team, excellent customers. And I feel like 17 years into this and I'm just getting started.
Fantastic. Well, sounds like you have a bright future in front of you, Collin.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
Well, thank you for the time today. Great discussion. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ned.
Thanks to our guests today for their great insights on Dare, the podcast for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders. If you'd like your story to be featured on Dare, just contact us at info@darwaft.com. Dare is brought to you by Darwaft, the tech team that can make your vision a reality.